Ashikamat. Again, Council Life, thank you for coming out today to sit with us on Sad Song. And before I begin, I need to ask the permission of the elders to speak. Theravada Ji, and I have your permission.
By all means.
Thank you. Welcome to today's Sad Song. There's a couple things that need to be said before we get started on today's topic. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure what today's topic is.
Anatomy of consciousness.
Is it part 2 to the anatomy of consciousness? All right, part 2 to the anatomy of consciousness. Before we get started, one of the things in which that Siddharji and I were talking about earlier this week is that we don't want to give anyone the wrong impression as to what the House of Ra Afrika is. It's not a radical African movement as it pertains to our own liberation and struggle. Let's be very clear on that. It's no substitute for Christianity or Islam or any other religious system in which that we've been indoctrinated to. The House of Ra Afrika main proponent is to regain our original spirituality through the process of Sankofa. Our main concern is to reunite with that one consciousness, that one mindset. Again, of course, we're an African people, but it's so appropriate because, again, we're talking about a collective consciousness into one consciousness, and that one consciousness is the Creator, Mutir. So again, with the process of meditation and sadhana and all the other path that leads up to this oneness, that is our only purpose, to reunite on the path of Ma'at. If you think that Guru Sahib, Bhagwan Ra Afrika, is just an advent reader of some sort, that he can speak on every subject because he have read an abundance of books, let me clarify that. You're highly mistaken. Guru Sahib has obtained that state of consciousness, whereas that he is used as a vehicle, as a channel, to speak. The ancestors speak to him and through him. So therefore, I want to be clear on this thing because this is no substitute. This is no game. This is no game at all. We don't play spiritual around here. It depends on the individual efforts of each and every one of you in terms of your sincere efforts on this path of Ma'at. So after saying that, there's several announcements in which that we're going to make after the workshop. But I think there's no more announcements, right? So without further ado, I would like to jump on. He said afterwards. I would like to present Jumper Anki does have an announcement to make.
I think there was a slight misunderstanding. We was told that announcements are to be made after the set song. I was also asked to take about 5 to 10 minutes, I believe, to explain how I came to the path. It's okay. Well, what occurred was a good friend of mine told me of a meeting that was going on in Oak Park. And he was saying to me, he said, oh man, he said, there's this African spiritual thing going on in Oak Park. I don't know where it's going on, but it's going on in Oak Park, and since you're staying over there, maybe you might want to attend it. I said, well, yeah. I said, I go. He said, my son and I, we're going to be going. It's a 4-week thing, and he said, but if only I knew where it was, So I said, well, find out where it is, and I may go. So I was staying at the Y. So I said, I'm might go. It's on Sunday in the afternoon, I might go, you know. Of course, Sunday is the day of rest, so quite naturally I was going to be asleep probably. So he got back to me, called me, and said, oh, you know what, man, it's at the Y. So I said, oh, and I got to go. So I said, well, I'll see you there. So at the time prescribed, I showed up, and it wasn't a lot of people there. As a matter of fact, it was very few people. And I sat down, and Bhagwan came in, and Bilal was there with the recorder. I said, oh, a lot more people must be going to show up. I must be early, you know. So then, as I know, so Bhagwan started speaking, and as he was speaking, it was like this rush of information came to me. Like, I knew all this already, and I was shaking my head like this. You know, I don't know if they got any of them on film, but I think I was doing like this when we was talking. And then we were asked to ask questions to get involved. He gave us the opportunity to get involved because there wasn't that many people, so we was able to ask a lot of questions. And questions was asked and answered. And I said, well, you know, he was talking about meditating. The thing that got to me was, speaking about meditating, I've been doing some spiritual practice myself, and I've meditated. But he said something about meditating for 10% of your time. You know, I said, oh, that's a concept that is unbelievable. 10% of my time, that'd be 2 hours and 24 minutes, all at one time. You know, I said, oh, that's deep. And I started thinking about it. I thought about tithing, giving 10% of your money. I said, this makes more sense than giving 10% of my money. Not that I won't give 10% of my money, but this makes even more sense because here it is, I got this time is money, I should be giving this to the Creator. And I asked questions about that, and it was clear to me that this is what could be done. But it was also clear that it would take a lot of discipline for me to sit down for 2 hours and 24 minutes and meditate and not go to sleep. Probably take a lot of discipline for me to sit down more than 10 minutes and not go to sleep. So that was how I came to the path. Let me say this, that as I listened to Bhagwan speak, and like I said, it seemed like this information was just coming to me. Like I knew it already. The talk of initiation came up. I heard a lot of organizations initiate people, and I always shunned all the organizations ever said. And talking about being initiated in the House of Ra, what I got was that, you know, when you feel you're ready, you know, it wasn't no coercion, it wasn't any motivating, this is what we want you to do, or, you know, keep coming, keep learning, and when you feel you're ready, then you're initiated once you meet these certain qualifications. And so, it just so happened that the qualification that was being said that needed to be met by chance, at least that's the way I thought of it at the time, I had met him. So when it came time, which was the last week, said, if you want to be initiated, come and see me. And so Bhagwan was outside of the room that the meeting was in. I went and saw him and said, okay, I'm ready to be initiated. And myself and 2 other individuals were initiated. And I guess what comes clear to me, and since then I've been involved in some other initiations since then. And I was talking to Bilal at the last initiation. I said, you know, this is different from my initiation. You know? So more information was given, you know, or maybe I just heard more because my ears was open. Maybe that's a possibility. But at each initiation that I've participated in or been a part of or witnessed, I've learned more, not only about the process or the path, but I've learned more about me. And I've learned that I don't need to be attached to saving anybody. Because as I live the path, my being is not only being saved, but is saved. I don't have to go out and search for people and say, hey, you need to come listen to this. I just get to plant a seed, as Bilal told me, plant a seed and then watch it grow. I think my seed was planted lifetimes ago. And I think that's why when I listened to Bhagwan, I heard what I heard, because I've heard this over and over and over again many times before. I'm sure that you probably will have the same experience or maybe already have. And I appreciate your time to listen to it. Thanks.
so much, Dr. Humphrey. Here, my apologies. You know, senility is setting in at an awfully rapid rate. So please forgive me for not announcing that most informative part of satsang when the Radasi come forth to tell about their experience and what they heard to bring them to the path of Mahat. And again, one of the things that John Pahan mentioned was the fact that when Bhagwan spoke that he heard this thing before. Please be clear. Guru Sahib is the inner manifestation of the outer you. And he does touch the heart and soul of each and every one of us. So without further ado, I would like to present to you Bhagwan Raya Africa. The topic today is the anatomy of consciousness, part 2. Namo Guru Baya.
Namo Anami Baya. So we continue then the Saka, huh? And we don't know for sure when this series of talks on the anatomy, origin, and evolutions of consciousness will ever end, if in fact it will end. Acha. Sadarji, did you bring the marker today? I think we'll need a marker today. Good. Senility has not yet struck me. Good. Good. Because what I want to do is to sort of give you a familiarity with the concepts and some of the terminology that, thank you, that I'm going to have to resort to in order to talk in some depth and details about the anatomy, origin, and evolution of consciousness. And remember, when we are talking about the anatomy, evolution, and origin of consciousness, what I will be doing is telling you your own story of how you came into being and what will be experienced during the duration of that being, where you will be culminating into. It will be your story, you see, of what you have to look forward to. A tale, if you will, about where you've been, where you're at, and where you're going. Consciousness is the very warp and woof of our experience. And so I will try to give you some kind of encouragement, some kind of insights into this greatest mystery of all. Because there's so many mysteries in life, isn't it? Life itself is a mystery. Why are you even alive? Have you thought about it? There doesn't seem to be any logical and rational explanation for why you are even alive, or why you're in this particular form as a human being, in a galaxy, in a universe comprised of billions and billions and billions of planets and sub-universes. Why are you even alive? And why do you die? These are mysteries. But of all of the mysteries, the greatest mysteries, of course, is consciousness. What is this thing called consciousness? Because remember, without consciousness, you cannot even have the experience of being alive. Is that about right? So it seems then that consciousness is the foundation of all reality. In fact, there's no distinction between the two. Please make a note. Consciousness and reality are synonyms for the same thing. If you were not conscious, then you cannot have an experience of reality. And from where did reality come? Interesting. From where did existence itself come? Interesting. So these are big topics. Acha Setra, I don't know if we'll be able to exhaust these. We have one more shot at this thing, is that correct? Then we're on to some other topic. So I will be trying to cram a timeless history into a couple of hours here. And you will forgive me for failing. I tell you now, I will fail. How will I reduce that which is timeless and infinite to time into something that is finite? So, with no further ado, then let us begin to look at some preliminary concepts. Now remember last time we talked a little bit about it. We introduced the subject. We talked a little bit about the different levels of consciousness, and things of that nature. And hopefully we will have the time to try to complete those discussions. But if I should fail, then Dr. Mamaji's book on the Bardo must be available eventually somewhere. And in that last section of that book, there's an outline of all of these different various levels of consciousness. So I won't spend a lot of time on that because you can read that for yourself. I would like to rather discuss that which you can't read, and that will enable you to make what you read intelligible. So we're going to have to talk a little bit about what has been called in the perennial philosophy. By perennial philosophy, I mean that singular truth that has been taught in all the great wisdom traditions of the planets. Theravadaji, when we talk about these various forms of articulating truth, then we're talking about the various great traditions. For instance, Buddhism is just a way of articulating this one truth. Buddhism is a discussion of that is culturally specific to those people at that time and in that place. But it is an articulation of a truth that is transcendental to Buddhism. The same is the case with Hinduism or Vedanta or any of the 6 schools of Eastern philosophy. All of these are just different languages that was utilized to articulate that same one truth. The same is the case in Christianity. The same is the case in Islam. The same is the case in Judaism or Taoism or any of the great wisdom traditions. And what these great wisdom traditions are communicating to us is this one singular truth that has taken many forms of expression. And that truth is the truth regarding the nature and evolution of your own consciousness. That is a truth that has not changed. Yes, the ways that it has been articulated has changed. Right? Because that articulation, that expression, that form is in time and space. Anything in time and space is bound to change. But the truth that Buddhism or Hinduism or Christianity or Islam or any of the great traditions speak of, that truth is timeless. Hence we call it the eternal truth. You follow my point? And I have to make that point because sometimes we cling to the forms in which that truth has been expressed. And those forms belong to a bygone era. They're no longer appropriate or adaptable to this point in time and space. You follow me? Hence we become very romantic about the wisdom of the old folks. The wisdom of the old folks was simply a way that those people living at that time articulated this one timeless truth. Today, that timeless truth will have to be articulated for us. So we don't want to romanticize the past. When we become attached to the past in any shape, form, or fashion, then what we're really doing is denying the truth of evolution. Aren't we? Think about it. What you're saying is that evolution impacts everything in the universe. The physicists will tell you that. Except human beings. Now this is nonsense. You follow my point? If evolution is driving the course and the unfoldment of the whole known existence, how can it be not touching us as human beings? Follow my point? That evolution necessarily includes then the changing of the forms of articulation. So we won't be talking about that good old time religion, etc. Huh? We're going to be talking about a new time religion, a new age. because we are living in a different time. But remember, the truth will be the same. There's only one truth, one path, called by many different names, many approaches to it. But that truth is eternal. So you have to know something then about the genesis, the origin, and evolution of consciousness. Will that be all right? So relax, all right? And let me do my work, all right? And I want to start with the chain of being. Some of you who have studied classical philosophy and theology and religion and all of those nice things are already familiar with this chain of being. What this chain of being is really talking about is the evolution of consciousness. This same process is there even in when we talk about matter and things of that nature, but since I am not giving you a lecture on physics and quantum mechanics, I will bypass all of that. We're going to confine our discussion to the origin and evolution of consciousness as it pertains to your own individual experience, your own subjective experience of life. So we have to confine it just a little bit. But I want you to understand is that what is the process that has triggered and governs your being? We are a human being. Being is a verb. Have you noticed that? It's a verb because it is something that is ongoing. You are a process. Please make a note of that. Human being means you are a human process that is occurring. God ain't finished with you yet. Got a lot more for you. So you want to begin to understand now, what then is the ontogenesis, as the philosophers call it? What is the origin and genesis of your very being? And where is that going in terms of your experience, your conscious experience? Because remember, as this consciousness involved, the very nature of your conscious experience also evolves along with it. This is very interesting, and we'll make some sense out of it. Coming back to this chain of being, the sages and saints and mystics across all time, across all culture, have all, with no exception, identified certain stages of the development and the growth of human consciousness. Now I'm going to give you just some simplistic schematics here, right? And just for the purpose so you'll get a little bit familiar with the terminology, and then we'll be able to move through this very abstruse and complex subject with a little bit more clarity. That chain of being, for instance, in the West, you know it well. These are the structures through which consciousness moves, or rather, the structures that consciousness is embedded in. Just as an acorn tree is embedded in an acorn, that little seed is the structure, isn't it, that houses the potential tree. You follow my point? In the same way, there are structures that houses the full potential of consciousness, which we call God. When your consciousness has fully evolved, you become God. God is the name for the zenith of the unfoldment and evolution of your consciousness. This very consciousness you got now, please make a note. I am not talking about some abstract, imaginary consciousness. I'm talking about the same consciousness that you have right now that you are listening to me speak to you. That same consciousness that is aware that you're sitting in this room, that drove here today, that will leave here today. That same consciousness that is carrying all your memories and all these other things. That same consciousness is in a process of evolving. And when that cycle of evolution is complete, when the unfoldment is total, this total unfoldment of that very consciousness in you is what we call God. Please make a note of that. But in any case, this total potentiality that we call God is embedded in these structures. All right? And the mystics and sages talk about these structures. Now again, we'll start in the Western idiom and then we'll move a little bit. Will that be okay? Now if it gets too messy up here, you stop me, all right? And let me back up on things. So the first and lowest structure that houses consciousness, right? We call it matter, right? Let me put them all up here. Matter, body, mind, soul, spirit. And we're pretty much familiar with all of these things, right? But it is saying that consciousness embedded in its lowest structure is called matter. And as that consciousness begins to evolve, the structure changes. You follow me? With each climbing of this ladder of being, and this is what it is like, a ladder of being, that the self is climbing. And at each point on this rung, on this ladder of being, the nature of conscious experience expands. Your identity, your sense of identity expands, shifts, it changes. Your sense of morality changes. Your sense of who you are changes. Your sense of needs that you have change. Your sense of aesthetics, beauty, everything shifts because it becomes adapted to a higher level. Each higher level includes the lowest level. So there's a kind of process called integration going on. Okay? So again, this then gives us an ideal of the chain, hence the term, the chain of being. Right? And these are some Western terms, and I will come back to all of this later. But I just want to give you some terminology so you know where we're talking about. Now when we go to the East, for instance, if we look in Vedanta or in Hinduism, they have the same concept. But I want to demonstrate just briefly here is the universality of this truth about the change of being and that whole process that I said has been taught in all of the traditions, right? So that those of you who are from different traditions will recognize where we're coming from. So we all get on the same page here. Now I'm not going to exhaust them all because there's too many great wisdom traditions. Just going to put some of the most popular ones up here when it comes to this kind of metaphysics, all right? In Vedanta, they call this level the Ananda Maya Kosa. Terms don't mean anything. I'm just showing you, demonstrating to you that this is not just a model of the chain of being that is unique to the West or any culture for that matter. The next one is called the Pranamaya Kosa. At the next level, they have what they call the Manas Maya Kosa. It is interesting, this term that they use, Maya means illusion, right? Kosha means sheet, cover. So what they really are saying, like each of these structures creates and distorts the reality of who you are. And that as you climb up the ladder of being, the level of distortion go on diminishing. It's interesting, right? What it says is then that as you move up the hierarchy of being, your experience, being subject to illusion go on decreasing. You become less and less deluded. You follow my point? At this level, where most of us are at, total delusion is here. Maximum distance from truth. Total confusion, ignorance. Just don't know who you are, don't have a clue at all. You see? More about that later. Let's get the schematic up here, right? So again, in Sanskrit, they tend to use terminology that was a little bit more descriptive of the actual experience involved in the evolution of one's personal consciousness. The next one is what they call the Vijnana. And again, terms, you don't have to try to remember all this stuff. It's meaningless. The Vijnana Manakosha, right? Again, you see their correspondence, right? And the last is the Ananda. We've gone over this before. When was it, Bilal? year ago, 2 years
2
ago
years.
at the Royal House. So maybe it's somewhere on tape somewhere, I don't know. But I'm just giving you a brief outline here. Again, the same concept, right? Same concept. For instance, ananda means bliss, right? You see, and that's the last color, bliss, right? It's interesting to think and see that bliss is a color, right? But we'll take that one. Huh? We'll be just happy if we can get to that spirit level of our being. Remember, your being has many different levels, hence it is a being. You see? And the whole ideal of spirituality is the to consciously accelerate the evolution of your being. You see my point? In the African traditions, you have the same thing. You have the concept of Ged, you have the Saku, you have the Yid, you have the Ku, you have the Ba. Same concept everywhere you look. Again, in just classical Western metaphysics, we talk about the physical plane, we talk about the astral, we talk about the causal, we talk about what they call the material, spiritual, we talk about the pure spiritual. Okay, and some of the other traditions you hear us talk about Pinda. You might have seen me use that phrase Pinda, you see, and et cetera, et cetera. Same thing. Astral or Sahans don't call all, and I'm not going to go through all this. You get my point, right? Is that in all across all of the traditions, there is this same teaching of the same model of one's chain of being. The function of yoga, the function of meditation, is the deliberate acceleration of the growth and recovery of your total being. Now, we want to look at some interesting things here. I hope this is erasable, Sadarji. All right. I have to write a little faster and get this off the board. When we talk about the evolution of conscious experience through these structures, let's now try to put some flesh on that so that it just doesn't remain at the level of philosophy and metaphysics. All right? By matter, I mean the physical body. All right? The saints and sages use the term a little bit different from us. It's anything that is physical. It takes into consideration the whole physical universe in the proper sense. But certainly there's an aspect of who you are that is very physical. Right? Just for instance, this body is made up of atoms, right? These atoms organize and make up molecules. These molecules then organize and make up a cell. These cells now organize and make up an organism, and so forth and so on. You see this hierarchy now, right? And how each higher structure includes the lower, right? Cells have molecules and atoms, right? But atoms don't have cells. You see my point? So you see that with each evolution in the stages of development, it includes the lower, but it also adds a new element. You follow my point? So when we say matter, we're talking about the physical level. So some things you now need to understand about consciousness. Whatever consciousness contact with, it calls that itself. Whatever consciousness contacts, it identifies that as itself. You therefore can see that when consciousness has not evolved beyond the physical material level, right? That consciousness will actually have the illusion that I am the vehicle. I am the body. That's where most of us are at, right? Our sense of who we are is that we are this physical body. It is our identity, right? That this level of structure dictates to us our very feelings of our own identity. Is that about right? And notice that with this identity comes now also the dictation of what you consider to be your needs. I need me some food, I need me some money, I need me, you notice that? Listen to the things you say you really need. But one, I don't need none of this teaching, man. I need me some money. I understand, because you are still embedded. You are still at the lowest level of your own potential being. You are stuck. Your conscious development is arrested. You have not yet moved past that. And that is for a reason, because nature and other forces will automatically, with no effort of your own, evolve you to the level of a human being. Please note, evolution from that point has to be conscious and deliberate. It is very profound. Very profound. Just like on Saab, you've had to do nothing to grow, right? Nature has grown you up. It has moved you from your infantshood through childhood, through early adolescence, right? And it has done all of that. Right? It just has followed a timetable. No problem. You did nothing to bring hair on your face, to reach puberty. Nothing. It's given. But you will not move a certain point beyond in the chain of being without the deliberate acceleration. Are you getting my point now? Mm-hmm. All right. And so then, this level of the material self that has become identified with matter, right, is the lowest possible level of identity. It is the lowest structure through which consciousness moves and generates the experience of a me and an I, etc., etc. And remember, even your morality at that level is different, right? Morality at the level of the material self is that whatever gratifies my senses is right, and anything that interferes with that is wrong. Notice that. Your whole sense of morality is very narcissistic, very self-centric, very selfish. It is almost wrong to call that morality. But what can we do, right? We'll call it negative morality, all right? Right? It negates everybody else. You don't count, you don't count, you don't count, you don't count. Don't nothing out here count except those things that will give me gratification. At that level of self, at that level of conscious unfoldment, you don't even have the capacity to incorporate other people into the equation. You have no capacity for empathy. You can't even feel other people. You see, other people are experienced as objects, things, you can't even identify. Hence, the experience of love at the material level of consciousness is almost non-existent, because to experience love necessitates the ability to identify with someone. And at this level, you are so closed in on yourself. You are still autistic. You're closed down. You see these autistic children? They're not even in contact with the world. You see? In some sense then, at the material level, consciousness is almost in an autistic state compared to what your potentials are. By body, we simply means the emotions now, right? So that you have to follow me now, right? The body means the emotional, sexual, the libido, and drives, impulses, instincts. When consciousness now has evolved to this level, now you become capable of emotions and things of that nature. And again, as we move through it, perhaps next time, I want to lay foundation today so that we all get comfortable in terminology and concept, and then we will refine it. But the essential thing to understand is that you are able for the first time to have feelings of emotions at the lower level of the material self, right? All you have is hunger, thirst. You understand? You don't have any I likes, I don't likes, and I mean the whole emotional world is not even available to you. Why? Because Your consciousness have not moved up to that level of unfoldment yet. It therefore cannot even pick up that experience at all. So there's then this level of the body. And now notice that even at this level, your sense of identity shifts. Now you become identified with your emotional self. Is that about right? You see? You become identified there, right? Your emotions, your ambitions, your desires. You see? And that's where your level of identity is. And your morality is at that level as well. Your needs are at that level. You see? All of that is dictated there. It's built into the very structure that consciousness is in. Right? Now let's just work up this a little bit, and then we will go on to some other topics here. The level of the mind, right? That becomes pretty obvious, right? The mental level, the psychological level, right? When consciousness has unfolded to that level, you see, now it's gone quite a ways from the material self. A whole different reality, a whole different concept of who you are. Now you can identify with your roles that you play. That's the level where you become identified with roles. I am a husband, I am a wife, I am a brother, I'm black, I'm this, I'm that. You see, these are roles, aren't they? These are very abstract things, are they not? And your whole, not only your whole identity is identified with your ability to play a role now, with the role that you're playing. Your morality, right? Your self-needs. You notice? All of those things now align with the identity. What I'm trying to get you to see is that this identity that you have dictates your whole experience. It becomes your world view. Your perspective of the world is seen from that level. You see? And that is reflected in these things that I'm talking about. Your morality, your sense of self-needs, your sense of religion, and all of these things are shaped then by these various stages of the development and unfoldment of consciousness. But certainly at the level of the mind, you become very conventional. You're into roles and rules. For the first time, you have the capacity to play a role and to follow a rule. At the lower stages, you can't follow no rules. You don't even know what a role is. Some of us never get out of that stage. Have you noticed? Right? We can't be no husband because we have not evolved to a level where we can play the role of a husband. Simple. We have not spiritually grown to that point. We don't have enough consciousness to be a husband. How are you going to do that? You see? Rules? No way. You see? We cannot follow rules because we have not evolved to that level. We can follow our own selfishness, right? Rules I make, but I cannot do anything that is conventional. I cannot really interact with other human beings at all. It's really interesting. It means we have not evolved to it. At the level of soul, again, a tremendous shift takes place. All of the lords, of course, are interviewed, right? But one's identity shifts, one's needs shift, and so forth and so on. And it's the same at the level of the spirit. And again, we will talk about all of those things, perhaps in the next meeting. And certainly those of you who can get the Dhammaji's Bhagwan book, a lot of that stuff is in at the last part of it, right? So the question becomes now, how do we accelerate this process of human being? How do we free ourselves from the blind forces of nature, right? And become participants in the growth of our own consciousness. It's like climbing a ladder. It's the self climbing this ladder, this chain of being to arrive at its own final destination, which we have called God. And so I want to say a few things about that. Would that be all right? Because it's very important, isn't it? that we begin to understand what the whole purpose of these great wisdom traditions have been. Every great wisdom tradition has had as its aim and objective to instruct those adherents in the methods by which they can accelerate their own growth of consciousness. The interesting thing, and what is so relevant for us, is that as you are able to evolve into these higher structures through which your personal consciousness is flowing, one of the most profound shifts that you will have will be in your experience of suffering. Now this makes the whole thing worth it, all right? Right? Because we all are trying to find out how to end this suffering. When your consciousness is stuck in the very lowest structure of humanity, then your experience of suffering is maximum. Maximum. As you grow, as you evolve, as you open up, the strange experiences there, along with the shifts in identity and all of those, is that there is a complete diminishing and increasing degrees of the experience of suffering. And that is a tremendous thing. The Buddha, as well as so many of these great sages, when you examine the teaching closely, you'll find they teach one thing and one thing only: the ending of suffering. See my point? You don't want to suffer, but you don't know what is causing your suffering. You think it's your wife. Damn, Bhagwan, this woman, just get rid of her. Woo! You think it's not having enough money. Bhagwan, just wait until I give me some more money, and then this suffering is going to go away. Right? We're very confused. We don't have much understanding about this chain of being and the role it plays in your experience of suffering. And the mystics tell us over and over again that the only way to end suffering is to go within and up in consciousness, with no exception. This has been the teaching. To go on outgrowing these illusions and attachment to your false identities. So this whole business has to be better understood. And in order to appreciate that, the role that meditation and yoga and things of this nature plays in the process. Acha. Now, just as there are stages, developmental stages in this growth of consciousness, there are also developmental stages in the practice of meditation. And the reason I wanted to talk about this a little bit, from last talk, you remember, we talked about this business of withdrawing your attention inside, right? And as you're able to withdraw your attention, you're able to move into higher and higher stages and levels of consciousness. And each of these higher stage or level of consciousness generates a different experience of existence. Now it's very important, because if your consciousness is still embedded and trapped in the material level of your being, then your conscious experience of existence will be one of uninterrupted misery and suffering, by definition. It makes no difference what you do on that level. It will all end in the same experience: misery, heartbreak, disappointment, suffering, ignorance. Seeing this, then, is the first thing that has to happen to even make you want to move up. In the tradition, the saints, mystics talk about the necessity of dying to the lower part of yourself in order to access the higher. Right? Not talking about what the Heaven Gate people were talking about. You understand? They had it a little mixed up. They got a little confused. But that's what the Sahu mind, that's what this material self, it always confused, you see, about everything. So we want to begin to look at this process. And I want to speak on that a little bit today in some detail, simply because so many people come and they ask for initiation and things of that nature. And I want to make sure that people begin to have a better understanding of that. In fact, Bilal knows that I have now suggest that those who have not received initiation, that seeks initiation, should work with someone who has initiation. In effect, they will be like a tutor to you. They will become your sponsor. Their task will be to make sure you understand these things. And I'm happy that some of the Radasis have been willing to function in that capacity, because it's so important that you understand this stuff. Because not understanding it, you're not going to benefit from the whole purpose of getting initiated for a long time. You see? You will fight against the process. Again, a lot of the suffering is because we are resisting this movement to higher levels of our being. Is that about right, Angsar? Is that right, Bharataji? You don't want to give up this material being. You don't want to move on. The spiritual path is not necessarily suffering. It don't have to be hard. It is not a struggle by definition. It is hard, and it becomes a struggle because you are resistant. You are the one who is clinging to this misidentification of who you are. And hence, it is your clinging that is producing your suffering. It is your clinging that makes the path hard. I have to make this clear. Right, Rose? Because people are always accusing me. They say, Bhagwan, you didn't tell us this path is too hard, and and what do I say? The path is not hard. You hard-headed. Let me get it straight. Path is simple. Sahaj, easy to follow. A child of 10 can follow. It is hard. And it is causing you all kinds of problems because you are resistant to giving up and shedding this lower self of yours, because you don't know nothing about what is available at the higher levels of your own. So it is this ignorance that causes you to cling, and it is this clinging that is producing your suffering. You follow me? This is the teaching across all lines. So we want to talk now a little bit more about this whole business of withdrawing attention inside in order to access higher and higher structures in your human being, in order to generate and alter your conscious experience of existence. And we term this whole process meditation. Now, a couple of things. Bilal hates me using this board. I've tried to accommodate him. You all be as my witness, right? I've avoided doing this to him. But today we enter into a kind of topic that requires me to give you at least some kind of overall grasp of terminology and concepts in order to appreciate. There are stages in the development of meditation. There are stages in the development of spiritual practice. Spiritual practices are aimed to enable us to move up this hierarchy of our being. That's its whole function. And just like everything else, meditation and sadhana must obey the laws of evolution. Interesting, isn't it? Everything obeys the process. It's called evolution. There is no phenomenon that you can find in existence that does not go through a process of stages. None. Check it out. Think harder. Go ahead, examine it. Go deep. Go all the way down to the quantum level. You will find nothing that violates this process called evolution. So it's then the reason then that in sadhana also has to go through certain stages. There's an opening, there's an unfoldment. The ancient African sages call it opening the way. There is an opening of the way. It is a way. It is a Tao. It is a process that moves in very discrete and distinct stages. And you have to understand that, because many of us try to leapfrog through this thing, and you run into a wall and you are going nowhere. And And I do not want to participate in deceiving and deluding. There's a lot of people that you can find to do that. I don't want that honor. First stage. If you're going to travel a spiritual path, and remember, I am not saying that you should follow it. Please be clear. It is your choice. If you wish to remain exactly like you are, you have that choice. Who can interfere with your choice? If you are enjoying this miserable life, and there are some people you have to understand that are emotional and psychological masochists. They enjoy pain. They enjoy suffering. Take their little suffering from them, they have no conversation now. When you meet them, oh, that's the first thing they tell you. Their aches, their pain, how much they're suffering, how much financial suffering they're going through, racism, and all. That's their whole life. They are clinging to their suffering because they are sick. They are pathological. They are enjoying the suffering. Klingons, that's right, we're Klingons in the real sense of the word. Right? They enjoy that because now they can cry on your shoulder, right? Without their suffering and carrying it around, how would they get some sympathy? They've confused sympathy with being loved. They don't know what love is. They've not evolved, so they are confused. So they're looking for sympathy. And how to get your sympathy? Let me cry and whine and moan and all this other stuff. It's an ugly phenomenon. It is sick. It is pathological. But it is your choice. Please. I'm not saying turn it loose. Keep it if you like it, okay. This teaching is for those who have evolved to a point where they say, I want something better than this stuff. I had enough. I had enough. I'm ready to go home. You see, there comes a time when you're ready to go home. You see? You're ready to move on to another level. Even in our ordinary life we're experiencing, it's a time when you're tired of being a bachelor. That's time. You see? You're ready to settle down. You're ready to get married. It's a time you want to be a father now. You see? Something rises in you. Sometimes it's time you're ready to be a mother. You're ready to move on from that adolescent stage. But some people are stuck permanently in the adolescent stage. Their goals in life never exceeds a new pair of Nike. And watching all the games on TV. Their ambition never go beyond that. A dice game, a card game, a party. Where the party down? Party down. 75 years old, and you want to party. Your development has been arrested. You see, each of these have sub-stages. Actually, when we break them down into sub-stages, we'll get like 18 parts of the chain. Each, or 15 at least, right? Because they break down, right? And you can look and see. In fact, you can see where you are stuck. Where are you stuck? Look. Look. Where are you stuck? Don't matter about trying to find out where other people are stuck. Where are you stuck? In the chain of you. So remember, it is your call. At the House of Ra, we respect your decisions. Huh? But if you are ready to move into the deep wisdom, if you're ready to move into the deeper aspects of your being, right? If you have outgrown this stage in your life. And remember, only when you have outgrown it, because it is equally ugly for a child to try to grow up too soon. You see? Sometimes a kid should just be a kid. Is that right? You correct me. You are the elder in the house. Don't be shy. You agree?
I totally agree.
Archer, the elder has spoken, so I'm going to continue. Sometimes it is good to remain, if you are a child and you got a childish mind of knowledge that don't try to grow up, you see kids sometimes want to get grown too fast, and it injures them, don't it? So I want you to understand, if you still enjoy playing with bikes and dolls and marbles and spinning tops, nothing wrong. Enjoy it. But if you tired of being a kid, if you tired of living at the material level of being, if you had enough, then the path is for you. If you've not had enough, that's fine. Is that right on time? But after G, are we going to condemn them, make fun of them? No. It's not about that. We understand. You see? Now, there are therefore some stages now that we have to go through, and you can't get around them. First one, there has to be a training of attention. Meditation is about training attention. It's interesting. The thing that moves up the hierarchy is not consciousness. Because you've been thinking it's consciousness that moves up there. No. It is attention. We are functioning at these various lower structures of our being through the agency of our human attention. Consciousness is not moving nowhere. Consciousness does not move in space and time. Consciousness is the very foundation of space and time. Consciousness is stable. Consciousness is the ladder. You got my point? That you're climbing. Right? You're climbing that ladder with your attention. It's very important that you understand that. Right? Consciousness is the ground. If you eliminate everything in existence, what will be left is consciousness. So I don't want you to confuse it then. Spiritual practice is fundamentally the training of attention. That agency in consciousness that is mobile. You can move it. Have you noticed that? Have you looked at your own consciousness? Unless, of course, you know how to meditate, you can't see your own consciousness. In fact, you can't even see inside of your mind. Your vision is outward directed. You don't have any idea of all that junk in your mind, all that garbage. You can't even see it. You're totally unaware. You see? Because you can't move your attention up there. You follow my point? Now, so it's about training attention. But even before you can train attention, and as it relates to meditation and the withdrawal of it, you got to train attention out here, how attention is behaving in the world. I want you to understand that you have a thing called your personal behavior. Is that about right? Your personal behavior is rooted in the use of your attention, obviously. And therefore, the first effect on the path, the first thing, the first preliminary training will have to be training that we call moral and ethical. However you spell ethical. The first training then, the first preliminary training, is the training of your moral and ethical behavior. And this is the first stage that, especially here in the West, because we don't have a culture, we don't have a history that reflects the great teachings. Right? It is not compatible with truth as such. And so we don't get it. Now when they come and they ask for initiation, and I say, okay, you got to clean yourself up morally and ethically. Why? They say, why? Why I got to get off drugs? Why I got to stop drinking? Why I got to stop having promiscuous sex? Why I gotta stop selling drugs for a living? And why? What do that have to do with spiritual progress? Now, what can you do to a person like that? Except recommend you join a church. Because churches exist for people like you, right? That will be forgiving you for all your sins. And they have an infinite capacity to forgive you for sin. So go on sinning as much as you like. That's the right path for you. You sin, they forgive. That's a good deal, right? But the true path, it doesn't function like that. The true path functions on the principle of karma. You will reap what you sow, period. There is no escape. You understand? So there has to be then preparation of these preliminary stages. We haven't even talked about doing anything spiritual. We we setting up them in the context for which something spiritual can occur. And so the first training, the preliminary training, is the moral and ethical training. You must become a good human being. Ain't no way around it. And why? Because the mystics have understood that kind of lifestyle that you live in will keep you so distracted, keep you so whacked out of your mind. It is no possibility you'll be able to concentrate your attention and bring it within. You addicted to crack. How you gonna come in when the crack is out there? You can't let that crack go. You will remain out there. You can't come in. Your attention is enslaved to something out there. Hence, you got to get off of that. If you can't get off drugs, how you gonna come in here? Your mind gonna be in that VO bottle, no matter where you go. You see my point? So there has to be a preliminary moral and ethical training of your mind, cleaning it up some, cleaning up your life. And all great traditions do that, with no exception. Unfortunately, some of the great traditions have deteriorated now, down to the level where that's all they do. And people therefore have become confused. They confuse moral and ethical training and practice with attainment. That is not attainment. You see my point? It is a preliminary process. But it is a process that you cannot leapfrog across. And one of the things we suffer from here in the West is that we do not understand that. We really don't get it. And so, as a result, when we come to a path, we can never really make much progress because we have not done the preliminary stuff. And then, when we don't make much progress, we get discouraged, we get disappointed. You see my whole point? And then you say, well, this path ain't gonna work. You see? And then, just out there. You see my point? So we have to then do this thing called training of the mind in terms of morals and ethics. And that's the whole ideal behind diet, vegetarianism, things of that nature. It's to train you to start having some compassion. Now, you love it when I talk about bodhisattvas and meditating for the sake of all sentient beings. Oh, you get all charged up about that. But the vast majority don't even have compassion for other people. You don't even have compassion for a dog, a cow, chicken, nothing. You see? How you gonna suddenly now have compassion for all sentient? We have to train your mind to have compassion. You follow my point? Now, I'm not gonna slaughter this cow. I'm not going to exploit its life. I'm not going to interfere in its evolution up the chain of being just to gratify my own appetite. I'm not going to. I got some compassion. You see? You can't get no compassion reading no book. How you going to do that? You get it from the way you live. On top, that's what you said. Right? It's all in how you live. And the mystics agree with you. It's how you live in it. Right? And so, unless you are capable of imposing these restrictions on the mind that result in moral and ethical growth, you cannot move up the chain. Care how many books you read, care how many meetings you come to, care how much you pray, you're not going anywhere. In fact, just the opposite. Next time around, you won't even be a human being because you got to pay for all that karma. This ain't church. You got to pay a price. You see my point? So this is very, very important. And very often in ancient times, this period of training the mind morally and ethically lasted years. Years. So, again, I want to talk about these things because some of you will hopefully be sponsoring and sharing the teachings with other people, and I don't want you to not include the real deal here and just tell them about the Buddha stuff, the good stuff, right? Tell the whole story, right? So they have no delusions, you see? No disappointments when they come to the path. They'll be ready, right? Acha. So after then this preliminary training of the mind in order to create a moral and ethical living, now we can move to the next level of spiritual training. You following me now? And at that next level is where we now begin to train the body and mind. Now, again, I'm not going to be able to exhaust all of this subject today. This is a big subject. But we want to talk a little bit about it. The next level of training and discipline, because to be a disciple means to discipline. That's what disciple means. Disciple and discipline come from the same root word. They have the same meaning. When one becomes a disciple, one comes into self-discipline. Now, just as we have disciplined our outward life by undergoing the moral and ethical training, right? Now we're moving a little closer inside. Now we come into the next part. We still are not inside yet, but we getting there. The next thing we got to deal with is this body, right? As it relates to meditation. Because again, remember, the objective of meditation is to withdraw attention, right? Inside and up that hierarchy of structures. All the way back up to that point where we return to our total state. But to do that, we got to come through the body. So the body got to be trained. One of the biggest obstacles then, when one actually starts meditating, Sister Edwin, is how do I now overcome the obstacle of the physical body itself, right? You have to now train your body how to sit down and be still, because you don't know how to be still. You've never been still in your whole life for more than 20 years, right? Be still and know God is this part of the training. Physically still. What in the tradition we call how to adopt a steady posture, a steady assignment. Because again, remember, if you're trying to withdraw your attention inside, then you need to minimize the distraction. Again, that's one of the reasons why solitude becomes important on the path. Have you noticed that in almost all of the great traditions, much is said about silence and solitude, right? And one of the reasons is that you want to find a solitary place to practice your meditation so that you reduce the distraction occurring in the environment. Is that about right? And those who are practicing a meditation knows that that's a big obstacle in our neighborhood, right? Because the hood ain't never quiet. Always some stuff going on, right? And so you got to find a time and a place where the distractions that are just going on in the environment around you is minimal. Mystics talk about the time of elixir, that early part of the morning when night is cascading into day at dawn, is a natural time when the world is at a maximum level of calm, except on the west side. Now, those of you from the west side, I'm not talking about the west side, right? I'm talking about the rest of the world. The west side never sleeps. But in any case, certainly the dogs are not barking, the birds are not chirping. Nature tends to be very quiet in that transitional time. It therefore has been recommended, if possible, if it fits in with your lifestyle, as the best time to meditate. Now, Rose, I know that in our correspondence you found that out, right? The hard way, right? But it's true, isn't it?
That's right.
You can't cheat,
Birds
can you?
don't even chirp.
Birds are not chirping. But initially when we try to meditate, because to get up at that time requires too much training. So, well, Bhagwan, that sounds nice, but I'm going to do my meditation at 10 o'clock, you know what I mean, or 10:30. I got to see the news. I do mine after the news. Or I'm going to do my meditation at 12 o'clock. When I don't have to work. And I mean, you try to, just throw your meditation in any time, but slowly you start realizing that, boy, this meditation is hard now. I didn't calculate this. I didn't calculate that. Phone ringing, people coming by, right? You lose your ability to be regular and punctual. because you're still too weak to overcome those kind of obstacles. You're too weak to sit there and let that phone ring. That phone ring one time, you gotta get up. Your mind is start playing all kinds of tricks on you, right? Plus, this stuff is hurting you too. You know you're getting up. That might be emergency, right? So you gotta get up. So your mind, the training, our level of training is still too inadequate, still too weak, still too immature to be exposed to these kind of obstacles, right? So we pick that quiet time, right? And we begin to adjust our life to fit the path rather than trying to adjust the path to fit our life. That's the first turning point, to understand. You're no longer trying to fit the path into your schedule. You are fitting the schedule now into your path. It's a very different thought. It's a very different thought. You see? And it marks a turning point, too, for the disciple in terms of their understanding and maturity, right? They're beginning to reprioritize, right? Trivia is no longer the dominant concern of the disciple, right? For the vast majority of us, we are just involved in nothing but trivia, just pure bullshit, you see? And you have no time for spiritual practices. You have no time for God. You're too busy with your trivia. And then when you get old and one foot is in the grave, now you have time for God. Or some calamity befalls you, some sickness hits you. Now, you got some time for this God realization stuff. But when you're young or when everything's going right, you ain't got no time for this. Your spiritual practice come if you have some time left over after you've taken the garbage out for the day. Then you might do some meditation. You have not gone through the first part. Your understanding is not there. You see? You don't understand this. You're still confused. So today I'm trying to remove any confusion that hasn't been removed to this point, so that we're very, very clear on what's going on. In any case now, if we are able to find an environment of time where there's maximum silence and solitude, and the distractions on attention is not so great, where it's a little easier to withdraw it by focusing in on the objects of our concentration. For those of you initiated know we have a mantra. That's the whole function of a mantra. A mantra function is to serve as a point upon which to return your attention, right? It becomes an object for your attention, right? And by pulling your attention on that, it withdraws it from everything else, and the shift takes place up the hierarchy of being. You follow my point? In any case, the next obstacle after the environment, right, is this physical body itself. Because now when you sit, and even if you have been able to remove the distraction of the environment, now the body itself distracts you. Is that about right? Right? Pain, scratching, itching. We all know the symptoms, don't we, right? It doesn't take long. Now you're sitting there and suddenly you start itching. Ooh. Now your attention is gone off of that mantra, right? Your attention is on that itch, right? Or the legs start hurting, right? Or the stomach start growling because you ate that whole pizza at 11 o'clock last night and you ain't through digesting and the stomach is growling. You understand? But the body itself becomes an obstacle to the withdrawal of attention. And remember, by withdrawal of attention, I simply mean concentrated. Concentration of attention, right? It becomes an obstacle because you get distracted. Your mind come off the mantra, listening to your mantra, and it goes to whatever the problem is in the body, right? And sometimes your ability to concentrate is so immature and so undeveloped that once your mind runs out, you cannot for the life of you bring your mind back to the mantra. You just can't do it. Right? But that is a kind of training that we have to go through. See my point? We have to cross that barrier. But there certainly is a barrier, right? And so forth. Just quickly, and again, today we're almost out of time, so I'm not going to drag all the way through these things. We'll pick up next time. Somebody will hopefully remember where we're leaving off. But let me just outline briefly these levels of obstacles to concentration of the attention in order to bring it inside and move us up the hierarchy of our own being. After the body, if you are able to train your attention well enough to no longer be susceptible to distractions arising from the physical body, the next level of distraction arises from the emotions. It's interesting. Now you can't concentrate because all these memories are flooding your mind. You remember stuff you ain't even thought about in 59 years. Suddenly, when you meditated, all this comes up, right? Now somebody has made you angry that morning and you can't, for the life of you, you can't get your mind out of that, right? So the emotional materials now, you see, the emotional and psychological level begins to distract you. You haven't even made it into your mind. Right? Remember, when we are able to withdraw our attention to a certain level, you are able to actually see in your mind. Now this is profound. In Buddhism we call it mindfulness. You're actually able to see the contents of your mind. Right now you can't see the contents of your mind. You cannot see the anger that is already brewing in your mind. You see, you don't realize you're angry until you done shot somebody, killed somebody, cut somebody out, you know. Then you will, ooh. But that was emotion for 2 years. But you can't see in your mind. So there was no way that you could prepare yourself for its arrival, right? Now, you don't know that you're a murderer until you done murdered somebody. And you say, well, I didn't know I could. Damn. But you don't get, it was in you all the time. But you can see in your mind. You can see your alcoholism in your mind, and so it caught you. You didn't see that weakness in you. You can't see your weakness. You can't see your imperfection. You can't see your shortcomings. Hence, you cannot be prepared to deal with them at all. You have no ability to see into the mind. You can't be mindful. Meditation is that whole process that ultimately gives you the ability to become very conscious of the contents of your mind. Just like you're conscious of the contents in this room. You can see people in here. If somebody pull a gun, you can see that coming, hopefully, and whatever. You can respond appropriately to it. When you're able to see in your mind, you can respond appropriately to the contents in your mind. Not before. And so, but that requires a certain degree of concentration and internal vision. You have to actually bring your capacity to see and turn it around so that you can see inside. Hence we call it insight. Right? Insight, Baratara, is not something you get when you read a book and say, ooh, man, yeah. Insight is when you turn the attention around, you can actually see in your own mind. That is the real meaning of insight. That is the real meaning of revelation. But in any case, as we are able to train our attention, as that concentration becomes more and more mature, eventually reach a point where we're no longer distracted by the things arising at our emotional and psychological level. They no longer distract us. You see? We're able to withdraw our attention from that material that is moving in the stream of consciousness and return it to bear attention to the mind. Listening to the mind. We're no longer distracted. And we move to another level. You see? But we still have some more obstacles. The next level of obstacle is at the level of your thoughts, your thinking. Now, I must tell you that it takes a lot of practice to be able to withdraw your attention and get it developed to a point where it is not distracted by your thoughts and your thinking. Particularly when you have moved to a point where you can think. That's interesting. Most of us don't have to worry about it because we can't do no thinking, right? But eventually, you see, we reach a point where you actually learn how to think. And you start getting these tremendous insights when you sit down and get quiet and you start meditating. All kinds of knowledge start flooding in. You start understanding stuff you ain't understood your whole life. Is that right, Ro? Amen. Right? And it be some good stuff. It don't be like it's junk now. This high quality stuff. Right? You seeing deep. It's deep stuff. And it's so pleasurable. Learning and having this knowledge is so pleasurable. You can't take your attention out of that. You're this close to unlocking this great mystery, right? I mean, you this close to understanding how karma work, how compassion work, how suffering work, right? The nature of time, space. I mean, you're just this close, and it's so good, it's delicious, and you can't bring your attention out of that and return it to the bare attention on the mountain, right? It takes a lot of discipline. You agree? Right? But one eventually gets to this level, right? Where one is no longer distracted by the stuff that is going on in the form of our thinking, however delicious that thinking is. Right? And then when we're able to finally conquer that, now we have come into the eye center. Now this process begins. Now the path starts. Maharaj used to always make it a clear point to her. The path does not start till you come here. Everything belief here is preparation for the path. And you need to be very clear about that. And that preparation follows a certain line, and you cannot violate it. You must train yourself morally and ethically. You don't have no option. Not if you're going to travel the path. It has to be done. You must train the body to sit motionless and still. You have to do it. Otherwise, you'll never be able to overcome the distraction of the body. Hence, you'll never have much concentration. I have watched in these 30 years people who have been initiated many, many years, and they have never, ever got beyond beginner's mind, which means they have never had a true moment of concentration. They have not been able to steady their attention and hold it at all. At all. It's really tragic. They have not disciplined themselves. They have not been able to resist this urge to gratify. Whether you are distracted because you want to gratify your senses or you want to gratify your intellect, it is all the same thing. This inability to withdraw from gratification will interrupt the concentration. And they remain at a beginner's level. It's just tragic. It's really interesting, even in the East and in those cultures that have evolved to support this whole meditation process, they tend to make much better progress in terms of concentration than we do here in the West, because we have no cultural context for it. People in the West meditate for years, and they never are able to concentrate. They do therapy. They don't do meditation. They do self-therapy. They are examining old material and processing. That's not meditation. That's therapy. Nothing wrong with it, per se, but not be confused. So I think, Bilal, we said enough for today. There's one or two questions. We may have a minute to address it. But if there are no questions, then I turn the meeting back over to Satara.
Only one announcement was that Jaffa Ankh is coming next. So Jaffa, would you please?
And also introduced our new brothers. Are they here today? The new initiates.
Sure. And then
Would they stand, please?
Cecil, just initiated recently. There's a couple of announcements. One is that the satsang for the spiritual hungry, those of us who want to get together more, going to be held on the side of town that doesn't sleep, or on the west side. All right. At 115 South Pulaski Road. That's the Legler Library, and that will be next Saturday at 1:30 p.m. Okay, so that's for the Dasis, and invite someone to come along. As it says on the flyer, that Bhagwan will not be at the meeting physically. So you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. anything that you want of anybody that's there, and then if we're not able to answer each other, we'll ask Bhagwan the next week. So that's one announcement. Another announcement is that we all have an opportunity to do safe on the path. That's one of the things that takes us outside of ourselves, helps us to kill off the ego. And I was told that one of the opportunities for saving that we'll be able to do that will involve us totally, our total being, would be book saving. And the way it's been explained to me, and I think I got an understanding of it, is that we'll have an opportunity to do savor financially by purchasing a book and giving it away. We'll have an opportunity to savor mentally by inscribing our name and the way we could be contacted in the book, so that whoever we give it to can talk to us about the book. So hopefully we read the book before we give it away. Okay. And then we'll be putting some physical effort into it, because we would take the book, either put it in someone's hand or drop it off at the library or put it somewhere conspicuous where someone will be able to receive it. And then that will have us participate physically. And of course, when we do this, before we do it, we're going to be meditating, so our spirit will be in that book also. One thing I figured I had, as I meditated about this, I said, well, we're going to do this right at the end, because I was told to make this announcement at the end. So once this was over, everybody's going to rush to the back, purchase literature and books, and get out there. Bilal has some
Stickers.
Hey, some stickers. That's good word. Okay. He has some stickers that he'll make up to put your name and address, or name and telephone number where you can be contacted. But in the meantime, you can just print it in there, and that would be great. I've been informed that Save was good, and I've been participating in it. As a matter of fact, we start at 1:30. We congregate here at 1:30, and there's a few of us who designate ourselves the chairman. We set up the chairs, and that's good. Save it makes us feel good. And so if you want to come early and be a chairperson, you can be here early. You can be a chairperson too. And is there any other announcements? Oh, okay. Okay. Save is service. Rasa G asked me to explain what Save is. Save is service, and it's doing service for all sentient beings. And recognize when we do this book service, and we're inviting people to the path, and the more people that come to the path, the more people that live the life of kindliness, and the consciousness of everybody is raised. So save is what we're about. And then I was asked to say that there's various information on the back table, and Sabrad showing me a particular pamphlet on meditating one day at a time. So that's one of the free pamphlets on the back table. There are a couple that's free. Please grab those, take the time, read it.